There are moments in life when the weight of the world presses so heavily that the heart can barely breathe. Moments when the bed feels like a grave, when the night seems endless, when hope feels like a distant dream. We try to run, we try to hide, but the valleys find us, the valleys of loss, of betrayal, of death, of despair. And in those moments when every voice is silent and every comfort is gone, a whisper breaks through the darkness. The Lord is my shepherd, not a distant God, not a silent watcher, but a shepherd who knows your name, who walks into your valley, who stands beside you when everyone else leaves. That is the hope of Psalm 23, a psalm written not for perfect days, but for broken nights, not for triumph alone, but for tears and trembling hearts. The Lord is my shepherd. The very first words of Psalm 23 carry a depth so profound that generations have clung to them in their darkest nights and in their brightest days. These are not cold words on a page, nor a distant theological concept spoken from an ivory tower. They are personal, living, breathing truth. The Lord, the God who formed the mountains, who carved out the seas, who scattered the stars across the heavens, stoops down to take the place of a shepherd. He does not choose the throne of earthly kings. He does not come with armies and chariots, but with the gentle hands of one who leads sheep. And yet what makes it even more astonishing is the word my. David does not say the Lord is the shepherd or the Lord is a shepherd. He says the Lord is my shepherd. That one word changes everything. It transforms the Almighty from a distant figure into an intimate protector. It speaks of ownership, belonging, closeness, a bond between the sheep and the shepherd that cannot be broken. This is the longing of every human heart, to belong, to be cared for, to know that in a world filled with confusion, someone is guiding us, watching over us, holding us close. We can have riches and yet feel poor. We can be surrounded by people and yet feel utterly alone. We can possess influence and still live in emptiness. But when we know that the Lord is our shepherd, something changes deep within. It is not religion for the sake of duty, not ritual for the sake of appearances. It is relationship. It is a love so close that even when we are lost, even when we stumble, even when we stray, His voice calls us back. And the tenderness of that shepherd is seen not in lofty promises, but in real, personal care, feeding us when we are hungry, calming us when we are restless, protecting us when we are in danger, carrying us when we cannot walk another step. But why does humanity need a shepherd? Because without Him we are lost. Sheep are helpless animals. They cannot defend themselves. They cannot find their own way. They wander into pits and traps, and they scatter in fear when danger comes. That is the picture God paints of us without Him. We think we are strong, we boast in our wisdom, we trust in our wealth, we lean on our own understanding, but in the end we find ourselves broken and wandering. How many souls today are chasing after shadows, thinking they have found the path only to discover that it leads to sorrow and regret? How many lives are consumed by the pursuit of money, only to be left with emptiness? How many hearts search for fulfillment in relationships, only to be wounded again and again? Humanity without God is like a flock without a shepherd, scattered, vulnerable, exposed to wolves that devour without mercy. We need guidance because we cannot lead ourselves. Look at the world around us. Wars rage. Families break apart. Nations crumble under corruption. Children grow up fatherless and directionless. The philosophies of men change like the wind, one generation praising what the next condemns. The so-called wisdom of man promises progress but leaves behind brokenness. That is the picture of sheep gone astray. Scripture says all we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way. And in turning we find ourselves lost in the wilderness of sin, stumbling in the valley of despair, groping in the darkness of confusion. But when the Lord becomes our shepherd, everything changes. He does not only guide the masses, He calls His sheep by name. He knows your fears, your wounds, your struggles. He sees the hidden tears no one else notices. He understands the restless nights when sleep will not come, and the heaviness you carry in your heart that no one else can feel. And with a voice both tender and powerful, He says, "Follow me." It is a personal call, a loving pursuit. The shepherd goes after the one who wanders, leaving the 99 to bring back the one who is lost. That is not the picture of a distant deity. That is the heart of a personal God who refuses to let his sheep remain in danger. When David declared the Lord as his shepherd, he was declaring dependence. That is a word many of us resist. We want control, we want independence, we want to chart our own course. But the path of independence from God is the path of destruction. Sheep cannot survive without the shepherd, and man cannot survive without God. Our pride tells us we can handle life on our own, but our brokenness eventually exposes the truth. The shepherd is not a luxury, he is a necessity. And those who try to live without him discover that life without direction is a wilderness that consumes the soul. To confess the Lord as shepherd is to admit that we are sheep. That is not flattering. Sheep are not noble, not powerful, not cunning, not wise. They are weak, prone to wander, easy prey. And yet God chooses that image to remind us of our true condition. But here lies the beauty, what we lack. He provides. Where we are weak, he is strong. Where we are blind, he sees. Where we are defenseless, he protects. Where we wander, he leads us back. The very thing that exposes our helplessness becomes the stage for his greatness. And then we must understand the danger of living without a shepherd. Sheep without guidance will scatter. They will fall into pits, drink from polluted waters, starve in barren fields, and be torn apart by wolves. Without God, humanity destroys itself. Look around at the chaos of our world: violence, addiction, despair, greed. This is not progress. It is the cry of a flock without direction. But when the Lord becomes our shepherd, we find rest. We find peace. We find protection. His rod drives away the wolves. His staff pulls us back from the edge of destruction. He goes before us to prepare the way, and he stands behind us to guard our steps. So when David says, "The Lord is my shepherd," he is not reciting poetry for comfort. He is declaring a truth that defines his entire existence. It is not a casual statement. It is a confession of surrender, a cry of dependence, and a song of trust. The Creator of the universe has chosen to walk with us, to guide us, to care for us. And without him, we are nothing but lost sheep, wandering in a world that cannot save us. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. These words paint a picture of rest, peace, and restoration that is desperately needed in a world filled with chaos and unrest. The imagery is tender, yet powerful, for sheep will not lie down unless they feel completely safe, free from fear, free from hunger, free from threat. In the same way, human beings, restless and anxious, cannot find true peace until the shepherd provides it. Our hearts are constantly striving, constantly chasing, never satisfied, but the shepherd brings us to a place where we can rest. He brings us to green pastures, not barren ground, not empty soil, but places where nourishment is found, where the soul is fed and sustained. This is not the shallow comfort the world offers, not the fleeting pleasure that fades in a moment, but deep, lasting provision that fills the hunger of the heart. We live in a restless age. Anxiety grips minds, fear grips hearts, and busyness consumes lives. People lie awake at night scrolling through glowing screens, chasing after validation from others, or drowning their worries in distractions that never satisfy. And yet beneath the noise, the heart still cries for peace. The shepherd knows this, and he leads his sheep to still waters. Not raging rivers that sweep us away, not polluted streams that poison us, but still waters, quiet, calm, life-giving. It is there that the soul is refreshed. The world tells us to keep moving, to keep striving, to keep performing, but the shepherd tells us to stop, to rest, to lie down in the pastures he has prepared. He does not drive us with harsh demands. He leads us with gentleness, knowing when we are weary, knowing when our souls are parched, and taking us to the very place where healing is found. There is a deep truth here. Rest is not something we achieve. It is something given. The shepherd makes his sheep lie down. Sometimes we resist, clinging to our own ways, chasing after our own desires, exhausting ourselves with worry and fear. But the shepherd knows what we need, even when we do not. He pulls us away from barren fields that cannot satisfy. He takes us from waters that are poisoned by sin and despair, and he brings us to the still waters of his presence, his word, his spirit. It is there that we find what the world cannot give: peace that surpasses all understanding, rest for our restless souls, nourishment for our starving hearts. And then comes the phrase that touches the deepest wounds of the human condition. He restores my soul. There are people listening, people living right now, whose souls are broken. Life has wounded them, betrayal has cut deep, grief has left scars that do not heal easily. Sin has left its mark, dragging hearts into shame and guilt. Many walk through life smiling on the outside, but inside they are empty, fractured, bleeding. And here is the shepherd, not ignoring the pain, not condemning the weakness, but restoring the soul. This is not a surface level comfort. This is a deep healing that only the shepherd can bring. Restoration means something was broken, something was lost, something was damaged beyond repair by human hands. And yet the shepherd steps in where no one else can. He does not patch up the soul with temporary fixes. He restores. He makes whole. He brings back what was stolen, heals what was shattered, renews what was worn down. For every wound carried in silence, for every burden hidden from the world, the shepherd offers restoration. But this restoration is not only about pain, it is also about sin. The soul is weary because of guilt, because of rebellion, because of the stains that cannot be washed away by our own effort. Humanity has tried to cover its guilt with religion, with rituals, with good works, but the stain remains. And then comes the shepherd, offering forgiveness that cleanses, grace that renews, mercy that restores. The soul that once was heavy with shame is lifted. The heart once bound by chains is freed. The life once lost in darkness is brought into light. That is restoration. And yet even as the shepherd restores, he sees the brokenness of life. There are those who feel abandoned, who whisper in the night, "God, do you see me? Do you know what I am going through?" And the shepherd answers by leading them to still waters, by calming the storm within, by reminding them that they are not forgotten. The world may wound, but the shepherd heals. The world may leave scars, but the shepherd restores. This leads us into the fourth keynote, the brokenness of life and the hidden struggles we carry. The psalm does not deny the reality of human pain. It speaks of valleys, enemies, shadows of death. It acknowledges what every one of us knows to be true, that life is filled with hardship, with burdens, with sorrow. And yet in the midst of this, the shepherd offers peace. Think of the brokenness that surrounds us. Marriages torn apart, children growing up in fractured homes, loneliness eating away at hearts, addiction binding men and women in chains they cannot break. Think of the hidden struggles that never make it into the light, silent battles with depression, quiet tears shed behind closed doors, secrets carried for years that crush the spirit. We put on masks to face the world, but inside the pain lingers. That is the brokenness of life. And here Psalm 23 speaks directly into that reality. It does not offer empty platitudes. It offers a shepherd who restores the soul. The brokenness of life is not just around us. It is within. We wrestle with doubt. We struggle with fear. We stumble into sin. We carry regrets of things said and done, choices made that cannot be undone. The weight of it presses down until the soul cries out for relief. And the shepherd hears that cry. He comes not to condemn, but to save, not to crush, but to heal, not to reject, but to restore. The shepherd's presence in the midst of brokenness is what gives hope. He does not promise to erase every trial, but he promises to walk with us, to restore us, even in the midst of pain, to bring light into the darkness, peace into the storm, healing into the wounds we thought would never mend. The reality of hidden struggles is that no one else may see them, but the shepherd does. He sees the nights when you are overwhelmed with fear, the days when you feel you cannot go on, the moments when despair whispers that you are alone. He sees it all, and he meets you there, not with condemnation, but with compassion. He does not wait for you to clean yourself up. He comes to you in your brokenness, leading you gently, speaking your name, lifting your head when it hangs low. He is not a shepherd who abandons the wounded. He is the shepherd who binds up the brokenhearted, who carries the lambs close to his chest, who gives strength to the weary and rest to the restless. This is why Psalm 23 is so powerful. It acknowledges the brokenness of life without despair, because it introduces us to a shepherd who restores. The peace of green pastures and still waters is not a denial of pain. It is a promise that even in the midst of pain, the shepherd provides rest. The restoration of the soul is not the absence of wounds. It is the healing of wounds by the one who knows us better than we know ourselves. And the brokenness of life, though real and painful, is met with a shepherd whose presence is enough, whose care is sufficient, whose love restores what was lost. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. The psalm turns here from green pastures and still waters into the deepest and most painful reality of human existence, the valley. Every person, no matter their wealth, no matter their strength, no matter their power, will one day walk through valleys. It is not a question of if, but when. Valleys come in many forms. The valley of loss when a loved one is buried. The valley of betrayal when someone you trusted turns their back on you. The valley of sickness when the doctor's words strike your heart with fear. The valley of despair when you wake up each day and feel no reason to go on. The valley is the place where shadows hang over us, where the sunlight seems distant, where hope feels fragile. David does not say if I walk, but though I walk. It is certain every life will meet this place. But the psalm gives us more than despair. It gives us presence, for the shepherd walks there too. The valley of the shadow of death is not only about physical death, but about every brush with mortality, every reminder of our weakness. It is when you hold the hand of someone slipping from this world, when you hear the sobs of a grieving parent, when you feel the finality of a casket being lowered into the ground. It is when you sit alone, realizing how fragile your life truly is, how quickly everything can be taken away. Shadows loom large in these moments. Fear presses in, yet shadows, as dark as they may be, are powerless in themselves. They cannot harm, they only point to something greater. And for the believer, the shadow of death points not to despair, but to the light that still shines beyond. The presence of a shadow means there is a sun somewhere. The valley is dark, but it is not absent of hope, for the shepherd is near. Fear is the natural response of the valley. Human strength falters, human courage collapses, human hope withers. But David says, I will fear no evil. How could he say such a thing? Not because the valley is easy, not because evil does not exist, not because pain is not real, but because he is not alone. The shepherd is there. The presence of the shepherd changes everything. When a child is frightened in the night, the presence of a father calms them. When a soldier walks into battle, the presence of a trusted commander strengthens him. When we walk through the valley of shadows, the presence of the shepherd removes fear. The evil is real, the valley is deep, but the shepherd is greater. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Here we see the shepherd not only as a guide, but as a protector. The rod was a weapon used by the shepherd to strike down predators, to drive away wolves and lions, to defend the sheep from danger. The staff, with its hook, was used to guide, to pull back a wandering sheep, to rescue one caught in thorns or slipping on a cliff. Together the rod and staff paint a picture of both power and tenderness. The shepherd is not only gentle, he is strong. He is not only compassionate, he is fierce against the enemies that threaten his flock. And in that strength, in that guidance, there is comfort. How many of us long for that comfort in a world filled with danger and uncertainty? We face enemies of many kinds: fear, doubt, temptation, sin, despair. These enemies whisper that we will not make it, that we are alone, that the valley will consume us. But the shepherd's rod strikes against the enemy. He fights for his sheep. He defends them against forces they cannot withstand on their own. And his staff pulls them close. guiding them back when they wander, lifting them when they stumble, rescuing them when they fall. That is why the sheep can walk without fear, not because the valley is easy, but because the shepherd is strong. Consider the moments in life when you have felt surrounded, when it seemed like the walls were closing in, when the voices of doubt grew loud. Those were the moments when the shepherd's rod defended you, often in ways you could not even see. How many dangers has he shielded us from that we never knew existed? How many traps were avoided because he guided our steps another way? How many times did despair almost claim us until his staff pulled us back from the edge? We will never fully know the battles fought on our behalf, but we can trust that his rod and his staff have been at work protecting, guiding, comforting. Comfort in the valley does not come from the absence of pain, but from the presence of the shepherd. The rod does not eliminate the wolves from existing, but it stops them from devouring. The staff does not prevent the sheep from stumbling, but it rescues when they do. And this is the heart of comfort, not that life is free from suffering, but that in the midst of suffering we are not abandoned. The valley is real, but so is the shepherd. Evil is real, but so is his power. Fear is real, but so is his comfort. And think of the tenderness of that staff. A shepherd does not strike his sheep. He guides them. He does not abandon the weak. He lifts them. He does not despise the wounded. He carries them. In the same way, the Lord does not cast aside those who are struggling. He does not scorn the brokenhearted. He bends low with staff in hand to bring them back, to set them on their feet, to restore them once again. That is the comfort the psalmist speaks of. It is not the false comfort of words spoken without meaning. It is the deep comfort of a shepherd who has walked every valley, who knows every fear, who stands guard over every soul that belongs to him. When we think of valleys, we often think of loneliness. The crowd thins when the shadows grow long. Friends disappear when the road gets hard. Family may not understand the pain you carry, but the shepherd never leaves. His rod and his staff are not distant promises. They are present reality. They are with you in the valley. They are there in the hospital room. There at the graveside. There in the silence of midnight when the tears flow unseen. They are there when you feel abandoned, when you feel weak, when you feel broken beyond repair. And it is there that the words ring true. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. The valley of the shadow of death is unavoidable, but it is not unbearable. It is a place where fear would consume us if not for the presence of the shepherd and his rod and staff, symbols of both strength and guidance, remind us that we are never without help. The wolves may prowl, but they will not prevail. The shadows may fall, but they will not extinguish the light. The valley may be deep, but it is never empty, for the shepherd walks there too. Shadows are only possible because light exists. And in the darkest valleys of life, when fear grips the soul and despair whispers that all hope is gone, the presence of the shepherd reminds us that beyond the shadows there is still light. The shadow of death, the shadow of loss, the shadow of suffering, none of these can extinguish the light of his presence. He is there, walking with us. And the very existence of a shadow means that his light is still shining. This truth gives courage when our hearts tremble, because though evil surrounds us, though pain presses in, the shepherd's nearness is greater than the darkness that threatens to consume us. He is not a distant figure. He is beside us, guiding us, protecting us, carrying us if needed, and every shadow only proves the reality of his light. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. What an astonishing picture. The shepherd not only protects his sheep, but blesses them even when the enemy is near. He does not remove every adversary instantly, but he shows his power by setting a table in the very face of opposition. This is provision in the midst of battle, peace in the presence of conflict, assurance in the face of threat. When the enemy whispers defeat, the shepherd declares victory by feeding, sustaining, and honoring his own at a banquet that cannot be touched by hostile hands. It is a declaration that no matter how strong the enemy may appear, the shepherd's care is greater, his provision deeper, his power unshakable. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. These words are not a vague hope, but a confident declaration. The shepherd does not lead us for a season only to abandon us when life grows hard. His goodness and His mercy are constant companions. Goodness speaks of His provision, His blessings, His care that meets our every need, while mercy speaks of His compassion, His forgiveness, His steadfast love that refuses to let us go even when we stumble. They do not simply visit us occasionally. They pursue us. They follow us relentlessly, covering every day of our journey, whether in joy or sorrow, in success or failure. His goodness and mercy are always present, surrounding us with a love that cannot fail. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Here lies the final hope, the eternal promise that lifts our eyes beyond this broken world. The shepherd does not only guide us through green pastures and dark valleys. He leads us home, home where sorrow is gone, where death has no sting, where tears are wiped away by His own hand. The shepherd's care is not temporary. It is everlasting. His house is not a place we visit, but a dwelling where we belong forever, safe, whole, and at rest in His presence for eternity. Psalm 23 is not just poetry. It is life. It is hope. It is the cry of the weary soul that has found its shepherd. He leads us when we wander. He restores us when we are broken. He walks with us through shadows. He prepares a table, even in the presence of our enemies. He surrounds us with goodness and mercy, and He promises us an eternal home in His presence. This psalm carries us from the green pastures of peace to the deepest valleys of suffering, and then lifts our eyes to the house of the Lord forever. It reminds us that no matter what we face, fear, pain, death itself, we are never alone. The shepherd is with us, guiding, protecting, and carrying us safely home.